Now, I don't expect many of you to know who you're looking at on your screen, but you need to know a very important fact. This young lady may have just single-handedly demolished the entire Biden administration. A reveal so large, so shocking, so astounding how it could ever happen. It left me in stunned silence. And you are about to learn all the details of exactly what she just exposed. My name is Justus Knight. Huge favor, check below. Make sure you are still subscribed. I see it every day in the comments. Thank you, Justus, for letting me know. I can't believe I wasn't. So make sure you are. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe. So much more news to come. You know your means of supporting me aren't here. They're actually at restrictedrepublic.com. It's where we give you all the exclusive content you so richly deserve. After today's story, you will understand exactly why we created that platform. It wasn't only a want to do, it was an absolute must do. And you'll learn all the details here in just a second. Right now, to take advantage of Restricted Republic, you always get 14 days for free. Cancel anytime, no commercials, no interruptions. Use discount code TRUMP2024 to get $4 a month for 3 years plus 14 days for free. Get there today. It's your means of assuring I can continue to bring you stories just like this.
In September 2021, I started looking into the government's funding of censorship tools after finding that the National Science Foundation had launched a program awarding grants to researchers to develop projects aimed at combating misinformation. What I discovered was a multi-million-dollar effort to build what I call a censorship industrial complex.
And that is just the tip of the iceberg. If you could possibly understate what this young woman uncovered, it is unreal. Daily Caller News Foundation reporter reveals how the Biden administration is quietly funding, as she stated, a censorship industrial complex. This goes far further than you may imagine, and far beyond even stories we have covered before. It's just another government institution intruding on the very rights and freedoms guaranteed to us by our Constitution.
Using taxpayer dollars as seed funding for various projects. The efforts fit within the broader trend of the federal government's increasing involvement in online censorship, from the Center for Disease Control flagging posts during COVID-19 to the FBI working with social media companies to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop.
Ongoing campaign, something that the American public should never, ever tolerate. But thus far, it just continues to grow no matter how many of these hearings we see. The National Science Foundation received the funding for its research plan titled Track F. And to add insult to injury, you're paying for censorship to yourself. That's where our tax dollars are going towards. Part of this broader campaign, as she mentioned, just like what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop story. How did they shell that story so quickly? Well, the government uses seed money to fund other organizations to do their dirty work. And many call it, as I do, a serious threat. The National Science Foundation has spent millions on projects combating what they deem misinformation.
In September 2021, the National Science Foundation awarded $750,000 each to 12 teams of researchers as part of a new research track within its Convergence Accelerator program titled Trust and Authenticity in Communication Systems.
Trust and authenticity, brought to you by your United States government, but they deny involvement. It's just where the story begins to get interesting, beyond stories I've covered for you before. State Department helped fund disinformation research group that reportedly blacklists conservative news sites, and that's ongoing. Hence why we created Restricted Republic to begin with. The U.S. State Department, through its Global Engagement Center, not the story we're covering today, helped facilitate funding for a group that reportedly worked to demonetize sites in claims are disseminating disinformation, or they so do declare, taking away the livelihoods from so many people while taking their tax money on top of it. But now we're going to the National Science Foundation. Interesting, huh? Innovation anywhere, opportunity everywhere, opportunity to silence you through their Convergence Accelerator program. Just going down into these cohorts, you'll go to 2021 and track F. It is modern life depends on access to communication systems that offer trustworthy and accurate information. What we deem to be trustworthy and accurate, we, the government. Yet these systems face a common threat. Communication systems, and who would want this in the hands of any government institution is the question. Democrat or Republican, it should make no difference because they can use it against either side depending on who's in power, but they never look at it that way, do they? They try to actually paint this as nonpartisan. Oh, it is partisan, and that comes from the horse's mouth itself. I'll read it to you in a second. Yet these systems face a common threat. Communication systems can be manipulated or can have unanticipated negative effects against the government narrative. The overarching goal of this track is to address the urgent need for tools and techniques that help our nation effectively prevent, mitigate, and adapt to critical threats to the communication system, aka misinformation. How do we know that? Well, here, I'm going to move my yellow lines for just a second. You'll see them just moving down in this article. What are they working on? What are these projects? The first project is ART. Led by Hack and Hackers, this team assists online communities with building trust around controversial topics such as, well, efficacy of something you're all so familiar with. What does the co-designing for trust do? It reimagines literacy to provide the cognitive, social, and emotional skills necessary to respond to problematic information. This is led by the University of Washington because, well, you'll find out shortly, you're just not smart enough to do your own research. And if you're from a minority community, you're incapable of doing your own research. Their words, not mine. And what is Co-Insights, how dare I miss that project, enables community fact-checking and academic organizations to collaborate and respond effectively to emerging misinformation narratives that stoke social conflict and distrust, led by Mead, and I'll cover them in just a moment a little bit deeper. Enable communities, fact-checkers, and academic organizations to act as the sheriffs to misinformation in lieu of the government who's not allowed to do it. So if we're not allowed to do it, what shall we do? Let's just subcontract it out. That's exactly what they're doing here. Course Correct, led by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, empowers journalists to identify misinformation networks, correct misinformation within the affected network. I'm sure they're not going to be calling Restricted Republic to participate in this. No, more than likely they'll call the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and they'll make sure that they act as the arbiters of truth against what they deem misinformation provided by competing journalists. You can't make this up. The DART Project. This team helps older adults recognize threats so they can protect themselves because the ones who are in the greatest danger are the elderly and our veterans. Their words, not mine, because they are just too prone to misinformation and don't have the bandwidth nor capability to determine what is truth. No joke. This is what our tax dollars are funding. I can continue to go into what George Washington University is working on, but I bet you could kind of guess by this point in time. The NSF has spent $38.8 million on its misinformation efforts since Biden took office in 2021, now exposed by this brave reporter, the young lady who should be able now to help tear down the administration based on what they are funding. The NFS, however, swears it does not engage in censorship, and I'll show you the emails, which tells you they know exactly what was going on. But taxpayer dollars spent on projects that are still troubling, and where the agency's responses to straightforward questions about its programs are rather elusive. Because now emails show how Biden officials considered covering up censorship activities in the wake of this newest report. They only change when they're caught. But the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of Federal Government had a hearing on this February 5th of 2024. Oh, it is new news, newer than anyone else will ever bring it to you. That's what we work hard to do. The weaponization of the National Science Foundation. How NSF is funding the development and automated tools to censor online speech at scale and trying to cover up its actions. Great. Our misinformation service helps policymakers at platforms who want to push responsibility for different judgments to someone outside the company because, Twitter and YouTube will just look really bad if they're the ones doing it themselves. We've seen that in the past. So what can we do? What should we do? We'll allow academia and other panels and other programs to censor for us and simply provide judgments, you'll read it verbatim, on who should speak and who should shut up and be silenced. What a wonderful program. So the government, being the NSF, working with universities and nonprofits, through federally funded censorship and propaganda tools, will report to big tech who should be silenced. I know many of you who understand the very basics of the Constitution would understand this is absolutely and should never be absolutely allowed whatsoever. But rather than not being allowed, it's growing in scope. It's accelerating. After the Disinformation Governance Board and such a fervor was brought out, what did they do? They just hit it and changed it. That's all they did. It's a shell game. The Biden White House directly coercing large social media companies such as Facebook to censor true information, memes, satire, eventually leading to Facebook changing its content moderation policy. That's just the beginning. Stanford's election integrity partnership. How much of this have we covered? But today we're on track F in this report provided. Michael Pozmantier. You're going to see a lot of emails from him in a second. He is on the NSF. You'll see it there. Program manager. Here's an email from him to many people. He just CC'd himself there. I'm contacting you because you have been recommended by my NSF colleagues or your peers to be reviewers for proposals in our accelerator track focused on combating mis- and disinformation and inauthentic behavior. But remember, they claim they had nothing to do with this. I believe you will bring valuable expertise and insights to our review panel, and we select projects to address this issue. After receiving a dozen proposals shortly thereafter that email, they announced the 24 research teams that had selected for the 2021 cohort tracks E and F, awarding 12 track F teams $750,000 apiece to censor your voices. That was only phase one. Total of $9 million. Phase two, another $5 million when they found the teams who could really silence you the best and the quickest. You'll see how that timeline accelerated rather quickly, and it's still, ongoing today. Of course it is. They're just having a hearing on it right now. You didn't think it would stop, did you? The University of Michigan intends to use federal funding to develop its tool WiseDex, which could use AI technology, which will only accelerate the censorship campaign far beyond what any of us could even fathom right now. To assess the veracity of content on social media and assist large social media platforms with what content should be removed or otherwise censored. And you see the NSF is copied on that email, so they do know exactly what's going on. Externalizing the difficult responsibility of censorship. Who should help them? Academia, of course. All funded through the government to help large social media platforms silence you. Meaden and their co-insights Identify, preempt, and respond to misinformation in minoritized communities. Very interesting what they say here. If it were to receive taxpayer dollars, Meaden would leverage its relationships and experience with WhatsApp, Telegram, and Signal to develop approaches that proactively identify and limit susceptibility to misinformation and pseudoscientific information online. They're all controlling what knowledge you learn and what knowledge you don't. In what size and what scale? How about 750,000 blogs and media articles crawled daily? They're watching everything. And they're providing recommendations. You wonder why some of your favorite YouTubers who maybe don't exist anymore got downstacked because they lost all their money, because their voices weren't allowed to be heard, because the algorithms and the censors and now AI are all working in conjunction with only supporting one narrative. And if you're on the wrong side of it again, depending on who's in the administration, you'll be silenced. And then they tout how they are the number one at doing their job. Oh, so proud. The project would also operate tip lines to source potentially problematic content and return misinformation interventions. All these fancy terms for silencing you. So what is their dream world, as stated in the email itself? In my dream world, social media platforms will put all the content they take down into a data enclave that researchers could run code against to produce aggregate analysis and benchmarks, different automated detection approaches without ever having direct access to the data. Just create an algorithm to silence even more, to identify who's providing the misinformation, and to assure they can never do it again. What's next? Misinformation gulags? We're not that far away at this point, folks. Just amazing to me. And it's all documented. The NSF involved every step of the way. You see every email that's put out. University of Wisconsin course correct. This will make you real happy. The University of Wisconsin-Madison, a total of $5.75 million to develop a tool, empowered efforts by journalists, developers, and citizens to fact-checking, delegitimizing information about election integrity and efficacy on social media. And Course Correct tool would allow fact-checkers to perform rapid cycle testing of fact-checking messages and monitor their real-time performance. Great. That's not even the most insulting part here, because what's coming up, how condescending it should be, how condescending it is, I apologize, is beyond imagination. In her ethnographic study of two conservative groups, they found out that basically those who are causing so many problems, well, they tend to read their Bible and their Constitution. How dare you? One practice centered around the close reading of textual documents deemed sacred, example, the Bible and the Constitution. Told you couldn't make this up. And Kate Starbird herself, you've seen her in so much of the testimony we provided, saying herself that since everything is politicized, but they claim this is nonpartisan. NSF-funded researchers believe the American public is not smart enough to discern fact from fiction, especially conservatives, minorities, and veterans. Littered throughout these researchers' federally funded projects is the paternalistic assumption that particular groups of American citizens are uniquely unable to differentiate between truth and falsehood online. As the MIT-led researchers explain in a summary of their proposed proposal to NSF, broad swaths, and they quote, broad swaths of the public cannot effectively sort truth from fiction. And who are those demographics? Again, in quotes, rural and indigenous communities, military veterans, older adults, and military families. And, by the way, again, older adults. It's despicable. According to researchers, and Tripodi's study found that many conservative respondents may have believed they were doing research, but were in fact only focused on the top results of Google, suddenly scrolling down and looking at subsequent paged results, not practicing proper click restraint, and hence not knowing how to do your own research. And hence, you shouldn't be allowed to do your own research, and hence, they should control everything you see because you don't have the capability or ability to disseminate fact from fiction. Unlike expert lateral readers, aka them. I'm not even going to hit this slide. Just getting irritated as I read this more. I got irritated when I read this last night. I'm irritated when I reread it this morning and prepared it for you. And I'm even more irritated now presenting it to you. NSF is trying to cover up its funding to make matters even worse. To avoid public scrutiny and public backlash to the Disinformation Governance Board, they simply just did track F. Let's just hide everything. In his email, Pozmantier referred to the campus reform article as the latest example of misinfo and attacks against researchers in this space. We got some problems here, folks. I knew it was a possibility that people would find out about us. I knew the blowback was a possibility, just a question of who is actually paying attention to what we're doing. We hope not many, but it turns out a lot were. Because one young lady demolishes everything through her research. Track F is a controversial topic. It is important for NSF to proactively develop a strategy to enable the foundation and funded researchers to be in sync, adding that many of the Track F researchers have extensive experience dealing with this issue, this controversial issue of going against the U.S. Constitution, silencing Americans with their own money. They're very capable of knowing how to deal with the backlash caused by that. Not saying that it should stop, which would have been the appropriate response. The NSF even provides recommendations of how to deal with the backlash. But remember, they said they're really not involved. I think it would be bad optics, in quotes. While I think it is worth alerting teams to what can go wrong if they engage with certain kinds of media outlets, I think it would be bad optics. We've talked about bad optics before, haven't we? For the NSF to have a blacklist of media sites that our teams systematically refuse to engage with, especially if it includes domestic sites. This looks like a good agenda to execute on. Pozmantier comes back, NSF, who allegedly knows nothing about this, who should never have a blacklist of media sites, and states, I agree 100%. That shouldn't be in there. I'll remove it. My name is and blank. I'm the marketing communication specialist here at University of Wisconsin School of Journalism. I'm going to put out a press release, but as you've asked NSF, government agency, I know I need to get your approval before I put out any press release on the program that you say you know nothing about, but yet you're approving the press release. Yeah. I hope you're all doing well. As we experienced last year, there are groups that want to frame the project working in the information integrity space in a negative light for their own ends. Or means, depending on how you want to phrase this. Mr. Pozmantier may be a little bit nervous that everybody found out. In short, NSF is not responding to any requests. What do we choose? Just be silent. What do we recommend that you choose, universities and censors and fact checkers? You should just be silent also. And by the way, the Daily Caller just did an article on NSF funding misinfo research. As you could guess, CA is included. This is from the NSF again. They've linked to some of the expo videos on YouTube, so I don't think it's a stretch that they could find all of them. I'm going to see about pulling them down or locking the pages ASAP. If you had nothing to hide, why would you take anything down? If you weren't doing something wrong, why would you take anything down? The guilt is in the statement itself. But don't worry. University of Wisconsin writes back to him and says, I got a plan. Why don't you highlight the one food safety issue we did so that people think we're actually doing legitimate work here? Just shelve everything else and get rid of those videos as quick as humanly possible because we've been caught. It's a big market, projected, according to this information, as a $10 billion industry of content moderation. That was in 2022. And why? Because any action platform policy owners take will be criticized. So they're going to be reluctant to innovate and reluctant to be transparent. So how do we solve it? We have a value proposition for you. Our external service will provide public, legitimate judgments. Platforms can focus on the engineering challenge of approximating the correct decisions quickly at large scale. We, through a golden set service, will convene juries. Accountability reports will use the jury judgments, and forecasting services will provide for any content item a forecast of jury outcomes. We will provide you with who you should censor. We'd sure hate for you to look bad, and we'd sure hate for this to be tied back to the seed money provided us by the U.S. government. Nope, you can't make any of this up, but the word is out now. The Biden administration is funding next-generation censorship technologies with millions of dollars in cash infusion, seed money, to start up AI censorship projects. The targets are political conservatives. Extremely proud to have broken this whole scandal wide open with a series of original reporting 18 months ago. Defund the weapons of mass deletion. And we wonder why now the Wall Street Journal editor-in-chief said we no longer own the news. Well, it appears they found a way to take that ownership back. But thanks to just a few brave people, after emails come out that will rip everything down, this young lady, through her brave words and brave testimony, blows the administration wide open, exposes everything. And I'll give her the last word because she so richly deserves it. I love you all, by the way. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.
The government is not the arbiter of truth. Our founders understood this, which is why we have a First Amendment. They understood the danger of the government telling people what they should believe and targeting opinions that cut against the official narrative. Pursuing information control by funding outside organizations is no less a threat to free speech and freedom of the press than a tyrannical government.
Hallelujah and amen. Till next time, signing out.